plenty of room when you guys leave tonight.
We would be
You
dead.
played right into that one.
Yes, yes. We would be dead if he was driving,
Wow.
because he would have tried to swerve and, you know.
I think so.
Yeah.
We
had a highway patrolman behind us and he says, I just kept praying, please, just don't swerve, don't brake, just hit it head on.
Just hit it, yeah. Take the impact.
So that's what we did,
Wow.
but I'm too old to take impacts like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just something else.
That had to be hairy. And
It
just
was
seeing it
awful.
coming at you.
Well, and see, he was asleep. Well, we're kind of
Oh,
asleep.
man.
He was almost there.
Oh, so you got to wake
He was
up and
almost
go.
there. Yeah.
She said some bad things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right before it hit us.
You didn't know she knew those words, did you?
Oh, I know him well.
She said some bad things, literally when it was within maybe 2 seconds.
2 seconds and getting us.
And so I'm
Just
like,
enough to open up
I'm
your eyes
like
and see
waking
it.
up like that just to see this thing,
Oh,
you know, hit us right. Hit us.
wow.
And it lifted the car up.
What
3 feet
my daughter,
on the tire.
look at the horse.
And it's like a saw, the axle was like a saw in the car.
Oh,
And then it lifted us 2 more feet up, and then we went down and spit back out behind us, and it destroyed the Prius behind us. There was one window, and then I
Oh,
think
wow.
it was a dad and a daughter, and they survived it. But if they had hit up first, they would have. But it was, they had no car left, 0 car.
Wow.
And the highway patrolman had just turned down through the median and back
Well, it
around,
looks like
and
you're
somebody
going on
radioed
minutes.
that there was this tire
Minutes,
flying down, you know, complete
Down the
tire.
highway.
What's the
Yeah.
amendment?
And so he was right behind the
You said
Prius,
something
so
about
that was
the
really
amendment. I've
awesome
been
because
reading
he took
On
off
the water policy?
after the guy that lost it,
Yeah,
caught him.
on the
So
tube.
then he
We
came out
passed
again.
that
Oh,
long
yeah.
I couldn't walk after, I couldn't
And,
walk, I
and,
couldn't come
and
in.
John.
Wow.
You know, adrenaline kicks in and-
Yeah,
It's in the minutes.
So it was, yeah,
Should be in
My
the
bills are
policy,
already
we need to
paid
get out of minutes and put it in the policy.
I'm surprised we're not.
All he can work
hundreds
is
of
that
thousands.
page
Yeah,
of
so
the
it's-
meeting,
it's
man, we got
ugly.
clean.
This in
and
here.
when neither one
Yeah,
of
but
us,
there's no
Like,
documentation.
this is
Real
better
good.
looking than my page.
Anyway,
The
the,
family dynamic lacks a little bit of decorum.
documentation of it actually being
he's been
passed.
getting a lot of cereal.
But they don't-
And be grateful for that.
Working for
Yeah.
them, so I'd rather spend.
And
But you know
I thought
what, the
6
angels were
months
there and
trying
we
to
are
find
alive,
it.
we shouldn't have made it.
Yeah,
We
and
shouldn't
I
have
thought
made
I really got out of it.
So what is it,
I didn't
just to
really
change
see
the
these stuff, but I
It's
just
just
diagnosed the other
The
day.
chairman can authorize up to
Yes,
$5,000
broken vertebrae.
purchases
Oh,
with
man.
only phone call.
Because he didn't go to the hospital, I did,
Oh, but okay.
but he wanted to stay with
So what
the
you're
car.
doing is you're.
Well, it's not
what's
really
left of
marketed,
it
is
or
it?
something.
Yeah, well.
Just what it was, you
Yeah.
know?
Uh,
It
So
was-
he put me in the ambulance
All of
and
a
sent
sudden
me
it
off,
started
and
the road work.
they,
Uh-huh.
And so we had.
anyway, but his
I'm
back,
surprised they
More
didn't
guys
get
come in and
go.
say.
Yeah.
That's
I
really
should
rare.
have, but I didn't.
Right.
but
So
his
what
back
policy
kept getting
does
worse
that?
and worse.
Because that
and
adrenaline hits, you
Yeah.
don't really know what's going on in your
Yeah,
body.
and it took the ground really well.
So you can get hold of
Yeah.
somebody to implement, get those.
And it was-
So now I can do it by phone.
It's been a little crazy,
Yeah,
That's insane.
and then you get to argue with the
In a big
insurance
city,
companies and.
A person might be able to do something.
My wife
Here,
got in the first
everybody's
accident in our whole
so-
marriage.
Yeah, pretty
She ran a
much.
stop sign
So
here.
it's not
A few months ago.
a big issue.
And nobody got injured or anything like that, but we had met
We'll
life,
nail
and
it
that was
down
one thing
tonight.
that made the accident actually a pleasure is that
I'll
MetLife
explain
did-
it a little bit more.
they took everything that we needed taken
Yeah,
care
I
of.
was
They
reading
took
it.
care of it, never got an argument from it or.
Didn't one thing about it, okay.
Yeah, our argument is coming
I kind of
from
read it, I thought, I wonder what they're changing on it.
the health
We're just-
insurance.
We're putting it together
We
again.
are meeting our PIP,
Yeah.
obviously.
Some
Right.
minutes, I
And
read all
then
of them,
it
and I only
goes
have
to
one
these guys
comment
that hit
on,
us, and it's just, yeah.
on one of
So
them.
it's.
Did I make a mistake? Sorry.
Huh?
Did I make a mistake? Sorry.
No, it was,
The first thing
It's
for you
just,
is
a
typo or something?
well, there's one typo, it says minutes for December
So, is that the
2021.
Tracy chair?
Okay.
That's for
But
you.
that is
That's
one
my
of the
chair.
That's your chair.
It was just to explain what's happened with, you know, there's minutes that talks about.
You notice that there's nothing behind them, so
Oh,
if they
yeah.
miss you, it doesn't hit anything.
Exactly. Where it's at.
Oh, sure.
Do you have
Gotcha.
the
Okay.
sweetest
I was just
daughter?
making sure.
I thought they were gonna say,
That
we
she's
thought
the one that
Jerry was
worked
here,
at.
and I wasn't, that's what I had.
Still
to say,
there,
like,
still there, yeah.
I,
I was in my house, you
How can you not love her? She's
Oh,
she's
she's
so
sweet.
sweet.
When I got out there, Nelson, listen,
She is.
she doesn't.
She's getting married this
I
year.
was still
Is she
moving
the
stuff in the
guy?
garage, and the electrician
They were
sitting
so
on my
cute, they
line.
came in when we were in there
Still
and
busy.
She just hauls him in the back.
Yeah, COVID.
We like him too.
He's out, they seem that you've done well, Deb.
She's,
You've done well with her.
Well, Robert's out there sliding it under the gate again this time.
This is the
He almost
third
said,
one?
well,
This is the second one.
Second one.
I'm working on my 15-year-old.
Zach.
That's a good age to get rid of him.
Well, yeah.
I'm working on my 15-year-old. Get out there, mingle.
We just bought him his own car. He's on his way.
Oh, no. it's-
Well, we didn't buy it. He bought it. I had
He
to
bought
pick
it.
it up. Yeah, and Mom had to drive it back because he only has a permit, but.
But he's staring at it in the driveway right now.
Oh, he's trying to do everything plus that.
Yeah. I remember my first car. I was the same thing. I bought my sister's Volkswagen before I actually turned 16. I polished it, put a stereo
Oh,
in it.
yeah, he's
I did all
already
kinds of things before.
changed some
before
oil
actually-
gaskets,
Yeah.
look at some new tunes.
Yeah.
There you go.
When that
There he is.
There's trouble. if I
It's
saw
2
it.
minutes.
I missed a call from him.
Sliding in under the gate, he said.
But you got about a minute or two.
And that's all covered. Yeah. I just couldn't find that nowhere, anywhere.
Well, you found the document you had?
Yeah, the policy that we're gonna redo is,
It's done, and it's right there.
You found it, Ross?
we could go to adjournment right now.
Yeah, I would just let it go home.
That's good, because I gotta go feed.
September.
All of 2018.
Yeah,
I lived all of 2019.
yeah, I thought that's what it was. That's tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I can write down the
I
journey.
was 20 minutes, so I didn't sure just look at it.
Uh,
Oh, yeah, you can find it on it. I couldn't find it. Yeah, it's actually 2018.
Now, ladies can do the minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Big Plains Water and Sewer Special Service District on April 1st, 2021. Please arise, we'll pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Okay, roll call.
Ross Gregerson, president.
Harold Merritt, present.
Jerry Jorgensen, present.
Dale Bettle called a little while ago and asked to be excused, so he is excused for this meeting. Any conflicts of interest that anybody is aware of, want to declare? The first order of business will be meeting minutes. I've read them all. I don't know if the rest of you have. I'm not. They would be for December 3rd of 2020 and January 7th, February 11th, and February 17th of 2021. So after you look through them, we'll vote on them. The only comment I might make while you're reading those is that one in December refers to an impact fee study, and it was not clear as to what happened to it. I might indicate that that study is being worked on by an independent source at this point. And we'll, when it gets back to us, we'll deal with it at that point. So that's the latest information on the impact fee study that's mentioned in the December 3rd minutes.
They're quiet now.
We're studying.
Yeah, I make a motion, we accept the minutes. December 3rd, we do them all?
Yes, let's do it as a group.
December 3rd, 2021, January 7th, 2021, February 11th, 2021, and February 17th, 2021.
Okay. Second?
Yes, second.
Vote?
Aye.
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 Minutes are approved as presented. John Barlow is out of town, and so we will hold the financial report at a later date. Water Superintendent, Mr. Dale Harris is present. We appreciate that.
I've got a few things. Harold and Ross, mostly Harold, got the Sheldon, the sandblaster hooked up on our 50,000 gallon tank. He's finished sandblasting that. We're gonna hire him to paint that and weld a seam that is showing through on the top of the tank. Harold's already priced out the paint, gold plated.
Yeah.
He's gotta meet the standards for American Water Works, of course.
You can't throw me under the bus for
What's that?
that.
Is you the one that found it?
Yes.
Well, it's two-part epoxy, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's expensive.
Well, it has to be. I
But
mean, that has to
But
be
it has
expensive,
to-
but it has to be.
but it has to meet safe drinking water standards and
Yeah,
be
you can't have it, right?
reasonably easy to apply, knowing how we're gonna manage it and stuff. So anyway, it is what it is.
I've got a 5-gallon bucket of lead paint.
Perfect. Let's just throw that on.
Can't use spray cans, right?
The other thing is just some water totals compared to 2019, compared to what we did in 2020. For 2019, we pumped 27 million gallons on the Apple Valley side of the system. In 2020, we pumped 42 million gallons on the Apple Valley side. 2019 for Cedar Point, we pumped just over 11 million gallons for 2019, and for 2020, we're just a couple of hundred gallons short of 23 million gallons. So as you can tell, we've doubled on both our systems. And then just a little FYI, Harold and Rod and Ross pretty much know this, but you know, this was our first year that we had to submit for Canaan for our water data. And of course, I've got to give the real numbers that happened on that. So we only used, actually charged for 4.9 million gallons in the Canaan system. But we ran, because we only had the one spring running for the whole year, we ran 22 million gallons down the creek. So just to show you how much that water it just kind of goes past us compared to what we're using. Once again, we need to get that in the 1 million gallon tank, and we need to start making use of that, because now that we've got that other spring going, we're looking at almost 60 million gallons a year that spring is going to produce for us, those springs. Would you agree with that number?
Yes.
So that was just the other thing we have. Rod's going to probably elaborate on some other things that has come our way. But other than that, okayed a couple of mainline extensions. The one for Pearson's finally done. Spend Loves is in. They've got meters in, got hydrant in. Seems like I have another line that, no, this is just the ongoing with Farrar's, doing the inspections on the Farrar's subdivision that's going on. They got that tied in, they being Fisher's El Cap. So there is water across from that Cedar Point entrance now. There's water on the other side of that road over to Farrar's. It's not in the system in the pipe over there. It's just still in the HPE pipe. They got put across there and it's locked in. Well, we've already flushed the chlorine out of it because I don't want any TTHMQs to be forming in there, a byproduct of chlorine. But that's about all I got. Busy, still installing meters that we have to install that we don't have a choice of doing. Had an inquiry from the Brett Gardner from Alpha Engineering on behalf of Washington County School District, looking for 80 shares of stock that in the Cedar Point Water Company to the tune of $400,000 that the Washington County School District purchased from Cedar Point Water Company in 2004. And I've given that to copy of that to Rod also, and he was going to try to get a hold of Craig Segmiller with the school, because from what I know and what I get from what Rod knows too is that that's not one of the agreements that we had. And the document's pretty vague too. It doesn't really mention water. It just says 80 shares of stock in the company, but that 80 shares has no representation of acre footage to it. I talked to Brent Gardner, and Brent Gardner said the same thing. I have no idea what the heck they paid $400,000 for. It just says 80 shares.
And paid to who? Do we know to whom?
They paid to the Cedar Point Water Company.
Oh, before we,
Yeah, this is in
Yeah.
2004.
yeah, okay.
August 10th of 2004 is when the document was, that's about all I've got.
Yeah, can you tell me again the Cedar Point numbers, 2019 and 2020?
2019 was just over 11 million gallons, and 2020 was 22,989, and I think 20 gallons or something like that was what we pumped. So we doubled that.
No, yeah.
The Apple Valley side was the biggest thing. A lot of this, I shouldn't say a lot of it, about 2 million of it came from bulk water use, but about 1.5 million of that bulk water use came from the 59 project. So that would be an anomaly because the project's done. But the other bulk water, the previous year we did about 750,000 gallons for the whole year on the Apple Valley side. So even if I backed out those guys that were doing the highway, we're still over 1 million too. So we did go up a little bit in our bulk usage on this side, but on our residential use, we went up substantially. And that, of course, has to do with the drought that we're in. And I'm sure everybody has heard that we are actually issued a state of emergency. The state of Utah did for the drought for the whole state of Utah. So it is real. We're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other question, the status on your truck, is there anything we need to know about that, or are we still?
No, I'm good. We put those 2 batteries in and I'm plugging along.
Oh, good.
I'm still using some oil. I just put a quart in. I'm using a quart of oil probably about once every 3 months, but other than that,
Oh, good.
runs the
Is it
same.
diesel?
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's normal, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I wouldn't go on a road trip, for,
We don't want you to.
yeah, I
We
wouldn't
want
be
you
doing
right
anything
here.
like that,
You got
but
3
it'll work
sisters
for
around.
around here, that's for sure. I wouldn't take it any further than the reclamation plant.
Did you have any questions?
Yeah, I got one. I just to bring up speed for me. On this spring we got up there, we're kicking out water down the ditch. Is this the one that we're tying into over there on the we're working on?
The 1 million gallon tank, correct.
And it's going to go to the 1 million, right? This tank
Yes.
we're doing.
Yeah.
How far is that line? Is that line being pushed over to that tank,
What
or?
are we, 2 miles? What is
A
that?
little over 2 miles.
So we're doing the line?
We're not in
Because
the-
I heard we were just coming out of the wilderness and then we had to find funding or something to go do that.
So, yeah, we've got, there's 2 projects. So the project that we're actually doing right now is the rehab of the spring and the line coming down. In fact, Rod's probably got good news. I'm not gonna steal his thunder on that. We're gonna be able to get a little bit further on that. Then the other component is aside of that, is that we're gonna take that water, some of that spring water, that we're not using over in Canaan, and that's gonna go over and be able to be used in Canaan on that 1 million gallon tank. Rod is in the middle of doing the paperwork to get us squared away on that, but we're not actively actually putting pipe in the ground or anything for that line over the 1 million gallon tank right now.
So the people The last time I was here, we had the private ranch over there that was in here trying to get, what did we ever do with them? I never heard that they ever come back. Oh, you're gonna do that? I get ahead of you?
I'll let Rod or Harold elaborate on that, because
Okay.
those guys have been dealing with.
Cool. All right, thanks. That's good.
Budget time is coming up, and you and I have discussed from time to time the impact fees. Could you give me a guess of how many impact fees we should probably be collecting?
We'll get 9 from Ferrars. We just had Roberts, because that was on the list, so that's 10. We got the lot split that happening on the 30 acres, but that's still not gonna happen, and we gotta get more water before that's gonna happen, but those impact fees will be coming. That Cliff Garrison property, which is across the street, is something that Rod and I actually okayed a long time ago. Cliff Garrison fell through on that. Somebody else has bought the property. That guy wants to extend that main line across over there, so we'll have that impact fee there. You and I talked about this the other day, and I came up with,
So collectible ones that are reasonably close to the,
is 10.
Is
That'll
10,
definitely,
so-
yeah,
we would be well over $100,000 on that.
yes.
So that's, okay.
And that's actually 11, because Roberts has been out of that. So that's 11 that I know of for sure this year. But of course, there's these other things that are hanging in the winds, but you know, for ours is actually being built right now. That's.
So with what we collected and these.
Oh, and then we have the impact fee for spend loves. That came in the first part of this year, but that's already happened. So yeah, we should be by 13, 14 by the end of the year of the known for sure ones that we're gonna get.
Okay,
And
so,
like I say, Ferrars is the one that makes up the big thing of that, because there's 9 of them on that property.
yeah, we're close to our budget numbers then when that comes in. So I just wanted that to be a matter of record, so as we work into the budget.
I know that there's 2 other places, I'm sorry, Harold, but I just can't think of them right now. But there's somebody else that I know that's coming.
That's close enough for now. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate all you do. Our district engineer, Mr. Rod Mills, we turn the time over to you.
Thank you. A lot of really good things to talk about tonight. So I've been actually looking forward to this meeting for a while. Let's start with the projects. The Canaan Springs project, we're financially about 75% complete on that project. What we have left, fortunately for us, and by just a lot of good people doing a lot of good things, we have an additional $150,000 in the budget as part of the project that we are going to be able to continue actually do the pipeline work that was originally budgeted. As you'll recall, when we did the original grant work, we had hoped to get all the way down to the highway with this project, but it wasn't allowed under the requirements or the criteria for the grant program that we were working from. All you can do is $150,000 worth of pipeline. The rest of it has to be spent on the actual rehabilitation of a damaged or compromised source. And that's what the whole program is about. And so we have spent all of our money on the damaged and compromised source. And now we have the $150,000 left to do pipeline work. So we're caught up on the budget, the paperwork miraculously is even caught up on. And to say that on a government project is a little frightening, actually. And so we've just got some reviews on the engineering side. I also issued a change order for engineering work related to the redesign of the spring portion of the pipeline. And the federal government is scrutinizing that change order and needs some documentation from me. And so we're working on that. But that will not hold up any additional pipeline work by the contractor. So we're just in discussions on getting them back on the schedule and finalizing that $150,000 worth of pipeline, and I think it's going to take us a ways. The rough part of the spring redevelopment and coming down the mountain is behind us. So I'm hoping optimistically that we'll have some really good digging going forward, and we'll be able to knock that piece of it out. That amount of money will still not get us all the way to the highway, but we are hoping that it will get us to the connection where we start with a larger diameter pipe that's already in place that has been servicing the subdivision for a while now. So we don't know exactly where that'll play out until we get numbers back from our contractor and get that authorized and going again. But we're really excited about that. That project, we will end up short of a catastrophe happening during the course of this $150,000 pipeline piece. We will come in under budget on the project, which is really good news. So now I'll segue to the next project. The fact that that project is looking that way is really helpful because we are actually applying to the same entity under the same program for financial help to do the pipeline connecting Cedar Point to Cannon Springs as the way to rehabilitate the crisis level production we're getting out of our wellheads in the Cedar Point portion of our system. This has always been something we wanted to do, felt like we needed to do, but really have never been in a position to really pull the trigger on it until we, well, bittersweet.
Yeah.
We're just not producing anything close to what is necessary in the Cedar Point portion of our development, and we absolutely need to get those systems connected as soon as possible. And having said that, an emergency for us doesn't necessarily translate to an emergency for anyone else. And even though this is an emergency program, there's still a lot of paperwork that gets reviewed at various levels of the government to make sure that we're being appropriate with monies from the citizens of the United States of America. So where we are on that process is the application has been set up. The numbers have been provided in terms of what we believe the overall cost will be. Big picture numbers, they're plus or minus 30%. And we have started the environmental process, which is the longest duration process in this piece. We are in a place where the clock is ticking on environmental notification. Part of what we're required to do as the district is send out letters to all of the federal entities that may be impacted by our project from an environmental perspective. And so a bunch of letters went out recently with a bunch of discussion about our project and where we intend to build and what it looks like and all of that. And the environmental people in the federal government will do an evaluation, while all of the other people that could conceivably be impacted by the project that are at the federal level, most of which are Native American tribes that have holdings somewhere in our area, and they're considered a national. They're a sovereign nation in many cases, and so the federal government requires everyone to notify them anywhere near their jurisdiction that something is going on with federal money. So those have all gone out. They have a certain period of time to reply to us, and then the USDA, along with some other partners on the environmental side, will review the responses and determine what level of environmental study needs to take place beyond what we provide. On the last project, which I felt was far more sensitive environmentally than this one, we ended up completing the environmental study with just some additional work on our end on the report that we already have in place. I'm anticipating that's going to be the case with this one, but I can't guarantee that. There may be some more environmental work to be done. We'll be back to the board whenever we figure that out and whenever those letters of decision come back from the federal government. But I'm not anticipating any problems. And in particular, we went to the additional effort of identifying 2 feasible alignments and not just one, and doing the environmental work on both of them, which is not fun. And I can just tell you, it's just not fun. There's just a lot of, paperwork that you get involved in, and I would have much preferred to have just done one, but it just appeared in the district's best interest and the timeframes that we were working on that it was better to do a little bit of more upfront effort to know that once we got through the environmental piece, we have an alignment we can make work. So both of them are in the environmental study. Just a stroke of luck, I guess, in some respects. Both alignments revealed very similar environmental issues. So one alignment over the other did not necessarily create larger environmental issues for us that may cause us a little bit of problems resolving. We're required to mitigate any of the issues. On the project that we're currently doing, the mitigation that was applied, and this is kind of behind the scenes, and probably nobody even has really heard about this, but we had to do the project in a certain window of construction because there is a migratory bird that nests in this area during a certain part of the year. And we had to commit our schedule out of that schedule. And that may seem crazy or whatever, however it hits you, but we had to do some of those kinds of mitigations for this current project. So fortunately got all through that, and we're just at the front end of that process on the new project. In addition, they require a preliminary engineering report, which necessitates the analysis of multiple alternatives. The federal government people came down, reviewed what they wanted to see as the alternatives. And so we discussed that in detail and are working through those alternatives. To just give you an example, one of them, they want us to review the potential of our wellheads in the Cedar Point development in terms of should we be doing redevelopment of those wells instead of laying the pipe? And would that be economically a sounder decision? And so we're going through the analysis of that. And I can kind of just tell you, we know what the wells do. We know how deep they are and all of that. We can deepen them. There is a possibility of getting a little bit more water, but the report essentially is going to say that we would spend a ton of money and get very small return on our investment to go that route. At some point, I don't consider that completely off the books. At some point, we really ought to find a reasonable well site somewhere in that area and drill to China. I mean, really get down, get down deep and see what happens. But none of what we currently have and what's available to us right now looks promising at all. So that's just one example. There are a number of other alternatives we're also reviewing in that requirement. Once the deadline on the environmental has passed and the federal government determines what the level of environmental work, if any, beyond what we've provided is necessary, then the preliminary engineering report and the environmental study, at whatever extent is acceptable, goes into the application, and they review all of that information in detail and either tell you you messed up and you got to do some revisions, which is very possible, and that interaction may take something in the order of a month or so. But once we're in that process, we can generally get to a funded project within just a few months. So I'm still very optimistic that we're doing this project this year and maybe even before the end of the summer. It feels like a stretch. The last one took us 2.5 years to get through. We just started on this one, in January? So we're doing really well time-wise. And I'm really optimistic that we're gonna get a fairly quick outcome. So, looking forward to laying that really critical pipe really, really soon. Any questions on that one before I move on to some other stuff?
No, I might add that, the easement through the Webb property is being reviewed now by attorneys for the Webb family. And, that's why it's not on the agenda, as they weren't through with their review or comments. So, it'll resurface when they're through with it, and we'll have that discussion.
Sounds good. That's for everybody's purposes. That's one of the two alignments that is in the environmental study, but that's a possible way to get to the million gallon tank. So additionally, there has been a lot of activity related to people inquiring about the availability of water and so forth. And in addition to what our superintendent talked about, the gentlemen who have the property adjacent to the gas station, who I think have submitted something to the town, but I'm not exactly sure at what level submittals are in place. But they've asked the district to begin our analysis of what the total impact fees and cost to the district would be for them to receive authorization from us to move forward with the project. There's an RV component to it, and some other commercial aspects that are kind of consistent with the gas station itself. So there's a few of those on the table. We haven't really seen any of those get out of the ground yet.
No, on that note, I forgot to, Harold knows this really quick. There was a 2-inch connection, when we put that water line through. It was supposed to be for the Chevron, because the Chevron was gonna give us their well.
Right.
That fell through, we didn't do that, so we have that 2-inch connection there, that's where I'm gonna connect those guys at, because we've already got it there, it's already saddled to me. Chevron didn't give anything for it, it was just, Moser was gonna trade that, and then they said, no, we don't wanna trade, and so we have that, that's where I'm gonna connect them from.
Yeah, so there's plans moving forward. I spoke to one of the gentlemen this morning, actually, and indicated that I would mention this project to the board to be aware that it's pending, whatever that actually means in terms of the process. So what I will be doing is evaluating the water usage requirements of that development and determining how much water use is actually required for that. And not only do we need to understand that in terms of the capacities of our system, but we also need to understand that in terms of the impact that they have on our system from a financial perspective. And the developer and we're all interested in making sure we've got capacity to take care of it. So I'll be doing that analysis along with several others that are kind of in the queue at some level or another. All of these will be reviewed by the state as well under code. And so we're just following normal protocols for most all of this activity. Having said that, I wanted to bring up the point that a number of years ago, we did work on and did complete through the board some procedures and policies that related to how a development project would work its way through the district. In some respects, that policy and that work that was done some time ago has kind of been put on the shelf because we've kind of been dealing with it just in terms of Wilson left. And it's really not really the best way to go about commercial development. So what I would suggest, just from the engineering side, because I'm the one that's doing the analysis on these things, is that at some point we take a little bit of time, particularly with the board, and go over those policies and procedures that actually, if you recall this, we found some districts that were similar to ours and had situations like ours in terms of interacting with either a town or a county that they were interfacing with for approvals of development projects, and took what we consider to be some of the best stuff out of those policies and put it into ours so that we would be ready for when commercial development started arriving here in Apple Valley and in Big Plains. And unfortunately, from my perspective, we really haven't deployed that policy and that work that you guys did back in those days, because we just haven't really pulled the program together. And I'd like to see that happen. And this is part of the reason. Part of that policy also covers the developer's responsibilities back to the district for review and all of the analysis that we go through to determine whether we can even service them. Well, in advance of a will serve letter or any discussion about a will serve letter. And there are requirements for, they pay deposits on the amount of pipe that they are installing to the district that is refundable, but becomes some of the financial resources that we use as a district to thoroughly evaluate their application. I think it's really important we do that. We've been doing that on a, shall I say, more of a cursory level, using the state's paperwork, and that's part of what we would do regardless. But I would like to have a more formal, you can hand the paper to somebody and say, this is what your relationship with the water district looks like if you intend to develop a commercial parcel in our jurisdiction. And it goes through a list, and yes, there are a number of steps to the process, and you pick them off as you go, and it is kind of a bit of a checklist, kind of a document. But I'd really like to see us deploy that as a district. It'll help me a ton to really be able to fully analyze things and be able to look you guys in the eyes and say, yes, this looks good, or no, we've got some challenges with this, and here's what the challenges are. And in many cases, we've done that by gosh and by golly, because we've had to extend some pipe, and we run the model on a regular basis to determine if there's additional piping needed and so forth, but on a very much informal basis. And to me, the formality of it also leads to better transparency, that everybody understands exactly what the process looks like and why we're doing what we're doing. Because I think there's even been some confusion about will serve letters and what they mean and how they should be issued and what goes on with those. The will serve letter issue gets completely resolved in this policy that you guys did some time ago. So I'm throwing that out. I think we probably need maybe a little bit of a workshop session to reevaluate that policy, to possibly even tweak it with what we've learned in, doing some of this commercial work over the last little while, and see if it still works for us, or toss it out and try something else. But I think going through the formality of what the process looks like to us as a district, and also what it looks like to a potential developer coming into the district, is something that is really sorely needed. So we're not starting from scratch on that, is what I'm really saying to you. And some really good work, and you guys may even remember this. It's been a little while ago, but I'd really like to re-engage in some of that discussion and get back on board. It's something that we could very easily share with the town. So in essence, if somebody walks into the town and says, hey, I'm looking at this development, town can tell them, well, here's your application process for our reviews, and this is when you get to the planning commission and that stuff. And parallel to that, they can give them this essentially this program, and they'll have a basic understanding of what the relationship between them and the district actually will look like going forward. And I think that it's gonna help everybody. And I feel like we were way out in front of the commercial stuff. I remember our chairman saying to us after several years of kind of turning the crank on a number of these kind of things, the last commercial project we did in this town was, I think it was the gas station at that point in time or something. And
That was even before I got here.
yeah, so there just wasn't a lot going on. But we went through the process of kind of looking at what it would look like when it did occur. And frankly, we just haven't really deployed it to the degree that we probably could.
Where are these?
So I think it did get adopted, and that's part of what I think we need to look into the workshop and see if it's actually in the policy. We may even need to go back, just like you guys did on this purchasing piece,
Fine.
and find the actual meetings. There were several meetings that we reviewed it over a period of several months. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually adopted. I'm not 100% sure that it actually ever made it into the manual. That's a part that I don't necessarily track really carefully on my end. So we have to just look at that and just resurrect that. If that's resonating with you guys, I'm throwing it out there because it occurred to me as I'm talking to this guy about, I need to calculate this stuff and make sure we've got capacity and where are we on our tanks and where are we on our distribution and all of that, and all that's bouncing around in my head. I'm thinking, gosh, we could just fall back to this policy and procedures document that we produced, and it would it'd give everybody a little bit of a guideline. It does put a little more pressure up front on the developer to deliver some deposits to kind of get us started, which hopefully, if they're serious about their development, some deposits are not going to be a death knell of any kind. But it does allow us to fund our analysis with revenues that should be derived from the development itself.
I've been thinking about the training that we're required to do as an SSD. Ross and I are the only remaining board members from the last training that occurred. So once the board is up to the appropriate numbers, we need to do the standard training, and we could roll this into that training so everybody would be familiar with what's happening. So I think that would be an appropriate time for all of that to take place, and it should probably take place it's in the middle of the summer is not a good time to be doing this. But
Yeah, it'd be good to get on that.
so it's either sooner or later. So maybe you and I can have a discussion about what kind of a calendar we want to look at to get the board trained as to what we should be doing in addition to this application process.
Thank you. I completely concur.
Jenny, Jerry?
I would say sooner than later.
Yeah.
Because when you hit summer, people are gonna be gone.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hard to rope people in, and then it's cool, you can get a lot more done.
And then lastly, if I may, Chair, I know I looked at the agenda and thought, well, there is a little bit of time to talk about some things this time. So are we okay?
Sure.
Okay. So the other thing that has come up in recent weeks and how they even included Dale Beto in the discussions is, what have we been doing in terms of planning for our future? And there just hasn't been a lot of really good communication about that either. And so I wanted to at least put back on the table some of the work that we have done. And for your purposes, again, this was something that the board actually did some time ago in preparation for just as a planning instance. So I pulled this particular sheet, and again, it's chicken scratchings on a drawing, but we went through the entire district and we identified potential locations for reservoirs, for transmission pipelines, and for filling in the network for sources, for wellheads, and potentially for spring development. And you can see this particular document was created before we owned the Canaan Springs project. But you can see that in our master plan, we have planned for a tank on the upper end of that system to be installed somewhere in the future. In addition, we have two large diameter transmission pipelines that run through the entire district from one end to the other in our long-term plan. The reason why that is really critical is when we've got sources all over our district, and our district is as spread out as it is, and we are in the current situation where if Dale is in a situation where he needs to, for whatever reason, chlorinate one of our systems, some of our people get that water before we get to our tanks, which is the best place to do the mixing of the chlorination. So we're forced to do some of that at our wellheads, not the optimum spot by any means, and release that into our system. And we're required by the state, and he's the expert on this, not me, but you have to have a certain amount of chlorine content in the water if you're in that kind of a process.
0.3 parts per million.
To reach the last connection on the last road, blah, blah, blah. It's very difficult to control that from the wellhead.
What that does, just to sorry, I really quick.
Yeah.
What that does is that you have to have detention, you have to have contact time and detention time with chlorine is how it's actually supposed to work. So when we're pumping it out of a well, you're trying to get that chlorine contact and that detention time in that pipe before it gets to that first server, and it's just not going to happen. When you have it up in the tank, especially when your water is coming into the top and has to fall, and you're chlorinating that way, you're able, like Rod just barely said, I'm able to actually create a 0.2 parts per million inside that tank and send that out evenly. I've made my contact time when the water has come in, and then in theory, because that water is coming on the top, we would do the formulation of how many hours, minutes it takes for that water to get from the top to the bottom of that, which gives us, now we've got our contention time with our chlorine. Now it's going out and we're even in our system. Where, like Rod was pointing out, first couple of people, they're gonna get socked because I've got to have that 0.2 at the furthest end of my system. So you can imagine what I've got to be feeding clear up here to achieve that clear at the bottom. That's why it's always critical for your water to go straight to your tank first.
Yeah, and so it's a situation that we inherited. But this overall plan, and admittedly over many years, it's not a tomorrow program, but it's a window into tomorrow and beyond, so that we can be guided by something. And I don't know, a lot of the folks in town, I don't think are even aware that we've gone to these level of efforts to try to stay ahead of things. You can see right on this that back in that day, priority number one, Canaan. Well, check it off, right? And this was well ahead of that. Priority number two at that time was a tank over in the Paradise, the Paradise Street lane area that we thought would help us in the interim. That's this one. I'm not completely sure that that's going to make it all the way through the master planning at this point, because we have some better locations to consider at this point. This is the tank that was part of the Jefferson Canyon project way back in the day. But as I understand it, is no longer in the program, and the mayor has said that he will help us to try to reestablish that plan, which is great. And then we have a couple of other tank locations high up above our system in several other areas. We've also done research. Each of these green dots represents a potential water source that either exists right now or we could develop it sometime in the future. Most of these are existing wellheads that are not necessarily in our system, but exist in the larger community that we would at some point potentially maybe inherit as developments move forward and things of that sort. So we need to get back into this program as well, I guess is what I'm saying. Help our community understand what the plans look like and what we want to do to take good care of them going forward, particularly the citizens that are already here, because I think that's always our first priority is the people that are committed to live in this community. We need to take care of them. And as development comes forward, continue to provide service that is at the standard that we would intend for them.
Which brings us to the responsibility of the board to maintain quality and quantity. We're using water like it's going out of style. We're in the middle of an emergency drought. We have to do something to make everybody aware of the seriousness of the situation. Obviously, by the amount of water that's being used, not too many people are picking up on it. So we need to brainstorm some way. Would a mailing of some sort, similar to Washington County's approach, what do you think of that?
I think that we should ask for conservation in a first letter. And then if we're not seeing it, then we've got to get stiffer with our command, with what we're saying. That's the approach that I would like to take. I think that people will react a lot better if they're asked, could you try to cut back, and let's see how that they react. And if not, then we're going to have to get stiffer than that, especially on the Cedar Point side. I want to make it a point to you folks is that what we pumped in 2020, if you remember right, we were able to run that well 59 at 80 gallons a minute. So we had that 80 gallons a minute, plus we had the cook well that we fired up June, if I remember right, that I was able to put in with that. That's how we generated that 22 million gallons. Well, we don't have that now. So all we have is just that 80 gallons a minute. So for me, if I take that 80 gallons a minute and I apply that to last year, I ran out of water last year. I ran out of water.
So,
Yeah.
did you have something else? I will start the process by writing some sort of letter or document, unless somebody's hand goes up and wants to do it. But I'll write the first draft, and then we will look at it as a board and as an engineer and a water superintendent, and do whatever is necessary to tune it up and try to get a mailing out well in advance of things getting really warm. So in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'd anticipate we could send our first mailing out and go from there. But I agree that I think a reminder, a thought that we've got some serious issues to deal with, and we're trying to deal with them. So I think we'll take that approach and see where it goes and go from there. Anything else, Ron?
I think that's good for tonight.
Appreciate all your good work, and I passed along I think it was the last check to PCI. So I think the contractor involved is completely paid. And so we're clear with them and ready to go whenever they can get there. Appreciate everybody's participation. The next item, discussion and action, was on purchasing policy that I could remember that we passed, Dale could remember it, and Ross could remember it, but nobody could find it. So we go to our policy manual and nothing's there, so we thought, I guess we're gonna have to pass it again. Well, I mentioned it to Ross, and lo and behold, he went home and did his homework, and there we have it.
Good man, Ross.
So
Awesome.
we don't need to pass it again, so we will table that, and
Do you want to make copies of that, and put in the record again? Because they couldn't find the paper in the office or something, right? Is that what it was? Do we want to make copies and give it back to them, or they can look it up?
I'll get copies back to you. I'll get some back Monday.
It's from the September 4th day of September 2018 meeting, and then the minutes came out the next to verify it, and in the October 4th meeting.
So anyway, Ross is now our official archivist. Is that the proper?
There you go. He wrote for the day at least.
Yeah.
And I look for it too. I will tell you, I looked for it also. I could not find it.
Okay, well, that finishes up the the agenda, unless anybody has anything they wish to add. If not, I would
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
second. Vote.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Follow me, we'll get the animals fed.
I just have a thought, I wanted to do a letter. This is off the record.
Thank you, Jerry.
Is it possible for some reason? This project really starting like 10 years ago, knowing that this was coming. Roadblocks.
You say?
Where's this, what?